Hey everyone, and welcome to our brand new show, It Ain't Weak to Speak. My name is Sam Webb, and this show is dedicated to ending the stigma around mental health through community, connection, and the hard-hitting truth. I'll be speaking with guests from all over the world about life to inspire and to educate people to speak up so that we can save more lives. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Welcome, Mr. Casey Lyons. Mate, how are you today?
Well, thanks, mate. How are you?
Really good, man. Really good. Obviously, over here in LA. Obviously, the reason why we want to, obviously get both of us on the show today is to explain to our community who we are, what we do, obviously our relationship, your relationship with Dwayne, and basically rewind the clock back to, why we're in this position and what LIVIN is all about, I guess, mate. So I want to ask you, first and foremost, before LIVIN, mate, what were you up to? Talk to me about your relationship with Dwayne and your life. How was all that?
Well, Dwayne and I, we met first day of grade 1, so we were the kids that got separated I think by about grade 3 that they separated us. They couldn't keep us in the same grade because we were just too naughty. So, unfortunately we got separated, but, that didn't stop anything. We still saw each other at lunch and outside of school we were still playing in the same football team. So, our friendship started from quite a young age, and it was something that, we both cherished so much. It took on another path after school, when the independence and freedom of having your own car came along, and, chasing girls and going to parties and doing all the things that young blokes do. It got to the point, we're just following each other around, doing what we do. Wherever he was, I was. Through our, teens, early teens, we were somewhat separated. I was trying to play rugby league, and Dwayne was doing very good at boxing, and boxing just took up all of his time. He used to train before school, during school, after school, which, and that took him on to, great things. Commonwealth Games, Australian champion, Commonwealth Games qualifier at a very young age. Australian champ at a very young age. He was going good in the boxing world, and then he had 2 elbow reconstructions, which kind of put an end to all of that. So I suppose that's him and I in a very small nutshell. Here, there, and everywhere, ups and downs, the lot.
Yeah. So obviously, what you're saying is almost like brothers from another mother, so to speak.
Yeah, and it was. Dwayne was very cheeky, and everyone anyone that ever met him can attest to that. And he was always putting shit on me. I was always putting shit on him, but it always came from a good place. And I think I miss the cheekiness and that smile that sort of certainly melted the ladies, but warmed everyone else's hearts.
He's a great man, mate. And just to rewind on that as well, man. I mean, back when we were teens, we all used to play football. As a competitive man yourself, and obviously Dwayne and myself, when we all used to sort of play and knock around on the rugby league park back on the Gold Coast, what were those experiences like with Dwayne?
Yeah. See, Dwayne and I was more when we were younger, before he took up boxing. So, I would have loved to have played when we were a bit older with him. When I think I played footy for so long just because of the extracurricular activities. Getting on the beers with your mates after the games and all the long bus trips with all the fun that we had on those on the way home. That's certainly what kept me in the game for longer than I needed to be in it. But I would have loved to have done that. But it was great to play when we were young kids. Some of my earliest memories, because Dwayne's dad was my coach, Gaz. So he was our coach, and Brody was in there too. So the 3 of us just used to knock around like a little pack.
Yeah, nice, man, nice. And I guess growing up and Dwayne taking on boxing, you were still playing rugby league. What were some of the, I guess, key qualities and attributes that Dwayne, I know you've mentioned, loving, charismatic, caring, cheeky, you throw around banter, but what were some of the best attributes Dwayne showed to you as a best mate?
Well, I think he was honest. he didn't tell you what you wanted to hear. He told you what the truth was. So he always knew where he stood, which was great. He was loving, and then he was loyal. So I suppose out of a friend, you couldn't ask for any three better attributes or three better traits. We clashed heads a lot, but we would, if we ever did have a fight or come to blows, it was all over pretty quick, and back to being the best of mates pretty quickly. I remember when we were young, I think I stayed at his house 2 or 3 nights in a row. I think by the third day we were in a punch on. Kimbo dropped me back at home, and then on Monday it was like nothing had happened. So, that's just what boys do, I suppose, growing up. But, loving, loyal, and honest.
And
I suppose there is 3 strongest.
And that's hits a nail on the head, I guess, from a best mate point of view. You guys can throw around banter, get serious, tell each other exactly the truth. But, at the end of the day, you guys remain best friends and get back to carrying on life together as a team, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. It's quite stubborn. I can be quite stubborn, but that was the beauty of it. He could back it up, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, definitely, man, definitely. And, mate, for everyone who is listening and who will be listening and who will tune into the show, can we fast forward now to 2013? Or maybe even prior to that, to introducing Dwayne and I guess why LIVIN started, and then maybe go back to the struggles that Dwayne faced as a young man, and why you and I are both sitting in this situation today, running a mental health nonprofit.
So that's very hard to say sort of when things started happening or things started changing for Dwayne. As it wasn't something he liked to talk about. There was only a few of us that kind of knew what was going on. Other people kind of guessed or made assumptions. But, up until that night at least, I look back and I think maybe the end of his boxing might have had something to do with it, something taken away from him before it could unfold or take him to where he really wanted to go or where he dedicated himself to go. That's all hindsight and it's all speculation. But I know looking back, the hardest part for Dwayne was sort of telling people or articulating how he felt. He never felt comfortable. Felt as though he was a burden to people. He was never a burden to me. There were times, and I didn't quite understand what was going on back then. He'd told me what was going on, but I still didn't have an understanding. And I suppose that was, looking back, one of the reasons why we had to choose the path we chose in the way in which we're doing it, because there are plenty of people doing plenty of great things. But what we noticed, you and I, Sam, was people weren't sort of doing what we were doing. There was sort of that gap in the market. And for Dwayne, that would have been very beneficial. Had he sort of had the information or the education that this is something quite normal. Mental illness is very normal. He's certainly not alone in his journey. There's plenty of people just like him living with a mental illness and living wonderful, great lives. Just managing their mental illness day to day. I suppose that was the catalyst looking back for doing what we are now doing. He just felt isolated. He felt different. He felt weird when he put his hand up to ask for help and felt like a burden, and he didn't need to feel this way.
Yeah, definitely. And, obviously I know because we speak together a fair bit, and, we mentioned that Dwayne suffered with bipolar and depression for a number of years, but he kept his struggles, very close to his chest, so to speak. Why do you think that was the main reason why he sort of held back? Why do you think, as Dwayne's best mate, obviously you knew more about him than most people, why do you feel like he hid the pain so well and put a great big smile on his face?
Well, probably 2 reasons. Dwayne always life of the party, smile on his face, and he just wanted everyone to have fun. He just always wanted people to have fun no matter what he was going through. So, and that started from a young age. So that's one side, and that's why no one could tell. But secondly, I just don't think he felt comfortable in accepting his mental illness himself because of these negative connotations that are out there and these beliefs that we've all been sort of taught from a very young age. It's just what he knew. And that's no one's fault. It's just how society is. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, so we can change society. He felt like a burden. He felt as though what he was going through was bringing everyone around him down, and it was certainly not the case. I used to chase him around the Gold Coast, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat because it's just what you do. And I think his hardest point was he just didn't understand. Therefore, he didn't know how to communicate.
So he didn't understand what he was actually going through, so therefore he couldn't articulate it to someone. So sort of he hid the pain behind all of that, and sort of just what a lot of men are told this day and age is, suck it up, or you'll be right, mate, just deal with it. So he basically just sort of sucked it up and lived with it day to day.
Yeah, and he didn't want to be perceived as weak, I suppose. All of his mates, none of them are living with a mental illness who they probably wouldn't understand. And as you just said, a lot of them would probably just say, suck it up, you'll be right. And, that never helps anyone.
No,
that only sort of adds to the burden and adds to the shame. And I suppose that was probably it too. He didn't want to be perceived as weak.
Yeah, and it just goes against everything that I guess what we're trying to achieve with LIVIN, and that's to end the stigma around mental health through community, education within schools and workplaces, and then obviously the amazing apparel that you and I are both representing right now, which I'm sure many other people can relate to.
And that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, Case, I just want to ask anyone that is listening and who will be listening, if someone's struggling in silence, that I guess doesn't know who to turn to or what to do, what's your personal advice to them?
Well, it's quite hard because it's such a complex answer because everyone's completely different. I suppose the one thing that can relate to anyone, this might sound contradicting. People don't care. They truly don't care what you do and all these things as long as you're happy. But what that also means is people really do care. So people don't care what you're doing day to day and whatnot as long as you're happy. They don't care. They'll move on with their life and do what they got to do. But as a whole, they truly do care about you. And I hope that makes sense because I suppose to simplify it further, in the micro, people don't care, but in the macro and your overall well-being, people care tremendous. They care about you more than you'll ever know. You are not a burden, and it is okay to ask for help, whether that be, your parents, a friend, a family member, or even a stranger, a teacher at school. Doesn't matter. People are out there, and people genuinely want to help. And sometimes people don't help, or they don't know how to help, so they got some coffee. Thanks, Dylan. They don't know how to help, so they might sort of avoid it altogether. But that's what we're trying to. It's what we're trying to change. We're trying to teach people how to help each other
and how to reach out and ask for help. Sometimes when we don't have the words to ask for help, we've got to learn and I guess teach people those tools and strategies to be able to reach out and ask for help when they desperately need it.
Yeah, I suppose to summarize all of that, it's the hardest point is usually first putting your hand up and reaching out, but it's oftentimes the most rewarding, and it's the start of a wonderful journey back to wellness and happiness.
Yeah, definitely, mate. I fully agree. And mate, I want to add to that. I remember obviously my relationship with Dwayne obviously wasn't as close as you and him were, obviously. But I did, get the opportunity to play football and alongside Dwayne in representative touch football teams and whatnot growing up. And I remember, and to back everything up that you said, life of the party, very charismatic. He was always, having a good time. Him and I used to always say, let's go to the top. It's a place that we sort of imagined. It was just a fun place that we just, we'd be so confident and full of life together. That's a place that we were always going to. And I remember very, very clearly the night of September 15 of 2013, the night Dwayne actually invited me to his place for a little bit of a barbecue and drinks and watching the football and whatnot. And I remember very clearly that evening, and I wasn't really aware about Dwayne's struggles. I was very similar to you in the regards that I didn't really know what they meant. Even though I've had my own experiences with these things in the past, I didn't really understand how to articulate it myself. So I can resonate with that. And I remember Dwayne calling me into his room that night, and he opened up to me and told me some very, secretive, deep things that, I didn't even see coming. I was so caught off guard, I didn't see it coming. And, mentioned that he was, he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I didn't have any idea. But what I was trying to do is listen as best as I possibly could have. I was trying to reassure him that things were great and that he had an amazing support network around. And I remember Dwayne telling me that evening that he tried to take his life before. And I know after the fact you knew this, I didn't have any idea. And someone that, as a friend of someone, and this is the first time they've heard this information, I didn't really know what to say. And I know when I look back now and the things that I've learned through the establishment of LIVIN and the people that we work alongside, problem solving, Sam kicked into play. So there's a lot of talking. You'll be right. I can't, it's fine that's what you've tried to do. And Dwayne reassuring me that life was great and that his future looked bright and promising. And it was certainly nothing he was ever going to try and do ever again. And problem solving Sam kept reassuring and talking. You'll be right. Please reach out to me if you're ever in a dark place again. I'll always be here for you. You've got an amazing support network. He's from the outside looking in, his life looked amazing, but obviously behind closed doors, as you said, Dwayne suffered, with some challenges that not many people really knew about. And at the end of the day, didn't really know how to talk about it. And I didn't know that was possibly the last time I was going to see Dwayne in living proof. I remember Dwayne telling me, some of his last words was, "Webb, don't worry, man, I'm fine. I'm sweet. All is good." And that was the last time that I saw Dwayne alive. Dwayne ended up taking his life that night. And I remember ringing him flat stick when I knew that he, disappeared from the party. And I was calling him, calling and texting and still no response. And I still to this day would have thought that he would have at least answered or reached out and, answered the calls when I rang or when you rang or, when his mum rang and stuff like that. And like, I sit here and beat myself up about it every single day. Could I have done more? Should I have done more? But, I thought I said everything and listened as best as I possibly could have in the moment that I was there. And, that impact that Dwayne's death, his suicide death, had on an entire community was life-changing for a lot of us. And I guess that's where LIVIN started. And I want to ask you this. I mean, reflecting on that night when I remember speaking with you, what was going through your head? Were you thinking the worst? Were you thinking, nah, he'll show up? Like,
yeah, it was. So, it's so for a bit of backstory. I wasn't there that night. I was at a friend's homecoming. A friend that lived overseas for a bit. Dwayne was actually meant to be there, but I think once he got home from work, it was a Saturday. He'd got home from work. He'd had a few too many beers. He had 2 or 3 beers. He couldn't drive, so instead he invited the party to his house. But I couldn't leave this person, so we were texting each other through the night. We were hoping to catch up later in the night and whatnot. But so that's kind of the backstory there. But when I found out he'd gone missing, of course I tried to ring him 100 times and message and whatnot, and stuff like this had happened before, but this time I just knew it wasn't right. Because most times every other time he'd answered me. After that 100th phone call, he'd answered me. But this time he didn't, so I knew I had to ring his parents, and that was probably hardest phone call I've ever made. So just because I knew it wasn't right and I knew something was wrong. So they're trying to ring him, and when he didn't answer their calls, I knew something was seriously up. And then I was then driving all around the Gold Coast, which I probably shouldn't have been. I'd had a few too many beers, but I didn't really care. I was actually ringing the police because I knew Dwayne had been drinking, and I was telling them that, and I wanted them to find him and pull him over and take him home, take him to prison, because it would have been a lot safer for him. But they they pretty much told me to piss off. But obviously I was quite stressed and never been so stressed in my life. But come 2 or 3 a.m., I'd never been more calm. And I just knew. I just knew it was time to go home, and I'd wake up to a call saying that he'd been found. And I was just kind of, I don't know, it was weird. I was just at peace. I just knew it had happened. And woke up to no calls, no messages. Actually woke up to a message from a girl that I'd been trying to date or take on a few dates. Sorry, we'd never been on a date. I'd tried, not through lack of trying. But I actually had a message from her saying, hey, would you like to catch up for breakfast? I was like, this is weird. So I went on the date. But I told her, I said, look, I'm not going to be any good. This is what's happened last night. And I think the food hadn't even come out, and I'd left, and I'd gone with Dwayne's parents to Broadbeach Police Station to lodge a missing persons report. Unbeknown to us at the time, when we were in there, the phone call actually had come through saying he'd been found. We weren't notified for another 3 or 4 hours afterwards. So yeah, I don't know. I think because I had a greater understanding of the situation, and I knew sort of what was going on with Dwayne, I knew that it was real, and I knew that it could happen. Hence, I was just stressed, and I was just not really angry. I was just stressed. Got to find him. Got to find him. Got to find him. Looking fucking everywhere for him. And then just so calm. I've never been so calm in my life. But then, yeah, next day, looking for him everywhere once again, and I happened to be on his bed when we got the phone call. A car pulled into the driveway, and I remember it clearly. It looked like his car, so I've jumped up running, didn't even make the door, and I got the phone call, and I didn't even need to answer. I knew what it was, and yeah. Yeah, it's funny. The Bulldogs were playing that afternoon in a semi-final. I believe they were playing Newcastle. I thought for sure the Bulldogs were going to win on the back of Dwayne, but I think they ended up getting towed up. So yeah, I think the rest after that was a bit of a blur for a couple of years. Memory became bad, and you look back and you talk to professionals, and trauma does that to you. Everything's a bit of a blur, and yeah, remember the funeral or parts of it, and the weeks and the days after. But yeah, it all becomes one big blur, and as you touched on, it rips everyone apart. Yeah. His family are the most beautiful family, and he's not here to be with them.
Yeah, and as you said, man, Dwayne was a very, very close man with his family, and they'll just never be the same again for him, and that's the hardest thing that this impact has on so many people.
Dwayne's mum comes in here once a week or once a fortnight. We go out and have lunch, and it's amazing. But yeah, I'll never replace him. That's for sure. So we got married in last year, and he wasn't there. Had a kid, he wasn't there. And this is what happens.
But I guess when we look at all that and what's been made in Dwayne's honour and in Dwayne's legacy with LIVIN, I mean, I'm sure he'd be looking down right now and looking at the work and everything that's gone into LIVIN and looking at you going, how grateful he is that this beast is saving lives.
He'd be laughing. He'd be saying, "Suck shit! Look at all the work you got to do."
Still being his cheeky self.
He'd be cheeky. He'd say, "Sucked in. Look at all the work you're doing." Of course, he'd be proud and he'd be loving it, but he'd be very cheeky, saying, "Look how busy you are. Look how stressed you are," and just pointing shit at me, which is good.
That's him to a T. That's your relationship to a T, man. And I guess to add on to that, I've never seen Dwayne so happy on that night.
Yeah,
that's the conversation we had, and it was just life of the party, the happiest man there, loudest man there, and You know?
He didn't mean to do what he did. It just happened, and unfortunately, it's not something he can live to regret or take back. What happened. Well, I can guarantee if he had that moment over again, he would never have done that. But yeah, unfortunately, it's happened, and he would have been happy. That's Dwayne. He would have been making sure everyone else was having a great night too. So, it just happened, and it's one of those spur of the moment things where, in that decision, he made a moment. In that moment, he made a decision, and unfortunately, he can't take that back. And yeah, we've just got to accept that that's a decision he made. He's a grown man, and that's a decision he made in that moment. And we've just got to stop people from joining him.
Yeah, definitely, man, 100%. And that's what we're here for, and that's what we do with LIVIN. And on that note, and just to sort of, before we move on to this next part of this session, how does you catch up with Dwayne's mum and dad and sister quite regularly? Obviously, you mentioned it before. What are their thoughts on LIVIN and everything and the work that gets done in the community? Like, is it like a bittersweet feeling for them? Like, what do you guys get to talk much about that? Like, how does that all play out?
Yeah, it's kind of the unsaid sort of, that's very proud, very, very proud. But yeah, it's a perfect world. They don't need to be proud. Dwayne's dad, he runs everywhere he runs. He's got a LIVIN hat on, and he's got a shirt with Dwayne's face on it. You'll see him running in all of the local Gold Coast events, and when it's hot, when it's cold, when it's raining, and he's always got a smile on his face because he's running with his son. It's hard for him. It's hard for everyone, but they're proud, and they certainly do love. They love to see the impact that it's having, or the positive impact that it's having in people's lives.
Yeah, and I guess it's in its own unique way. It's like Dwayne's still with us. He's still making a positive impact on people's life. This is what he set out to do.
Yeah, I often say Dwayne lives on in the smiles of the faces whose lives he impacts. That's when someone they're smiling, that's Dwayne, because that's all he ever did. If he wasn't angry, he was smiling. So 98% of the time he was smiling.
And they say an interesting fact too. They say a death by suicide has a direct impact on, they say, 115 people's lives. But you and I both can attest that the number far outweighs that. You can't put a number on someone's life. And Dwayne's death,
I think it's an infinite. You can't put a number on any death, especially by suicide. It just creates ripples effects. It creates ripples for years, generations, even. It never goes away. It lives with you forever, and Dwayne's sister's pregnant, and I'm sure that baby will know all about her uncle. So it just lives on, and it just keeps, that ripple just sort of keeps multiplying, and yeah. So it's an infinite infinite number.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with you with that, mate. Moving on, and where are you right now as we're speaking with you? Obviously, I'm in LA. I've dialed you in. Whereabouts are you? Let's fill the crew in.
I'm in the office in Burleigh. I'm in my little hot box. It's a warm summer's day. It's about 33 degrees at 9:30 in the morning. So yeah, that's where I am.
All right, and
you've locked me in here. I've had to turn my aircon off so it doesn't buzz in your ear, and
yeah, got the fan on.
Yeah, I got my $2 fan on.
Case, I haven't had a chance really to explain, because this is the first episode to introduce the show, and I wanted to leave it for you and I to both let people know what we're about, the people that don't know anyway. Give us a bit of a rundown about some of the work that gets done out of LIVIN headquarters, and an overall vision and mission, what we're working towards.
Well, for a small team, we got how many staff? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of us in here, and then there's yourself, Sammy. Plus, we get, not to discount the wonderful volunteers and supporters that we have. Some of them jump in and get their hands dirty, but a lot of work gets pumped out of here for such a small amount of people. I don't think people realise how small the team is, how many different sort of hats we're wearing. But so we've got Kelly. She's in charge of fundraisers. That's processing the fundraisers. It's helping coordinate the fundraisers. Then it's sort of issuing all the receipts and all the compliance and governance in relation with the fundraisers. We've then got Shay. Shay's come on board this year. She's in charge of organising all the logistics for our Living Well education program, which is our crowning glory. That's the education program which goes out to the schools, businesses, sporting clubs, right around the country. And I believe we've delivered some sessions in other countries around the world, New Zealand, United States. I believe that's it so far. Maybe London as well. I'm not sure. Can't remember. The coffee hasn't kicked in. That's quite a big job for one person. We've got 18 facilitators right now. They're just all subcontractors, and they're all around the country here in Australia. A 45-minute presentation, and this is what we believe will have that impact from an education standpoint. It's something that we're very proud of. It's warning signs, symptoms, where to go for help, how to help yourself, how to have those conversations.
Well, it's really something that it's something that you and I didn't have growing up in schools, and a lot of people don't have in workplaces or universities. And I guess that's the reason why we kicked off Living Well, so that we could educate the masses that it ain't weak to speak, but also to educate people the warning signs, the symptoms, self-help strategies, maybe how to help someone else, where to go for help if they are struggling. It's amazing, I can talk from, my experiences as being a facilitator within schools and workplaces, how many people are actually uneducated around the topic of mental health and suicide prevention. So I think you and I can hear it, we hear it, firsthand, the impact that this program has on people from all over Australia, that's for sure. And it goes to show that programs like this are very much needed.
Certainly, and I think we're our own worst critics too, because we sit there and we always question ourselves and question each other. What more can we be doing? The Living Well presentation itself, when you peel it back, it's quite simple. But that's what's needed, because we've never learnt anything. But I think that the real positive and the real strength of it is its simplicity, but also it's real, it's relatable. And our facilitators, it's a standardized program, but they throw in their own lived experience to it, which makes it relatable. And that's what people really resonate with. And yeah, it's amazing to see all the different facilitators and the little touch that they put on it, and their own sort of, the pride that they take in helping affect people's lives. These people were strangers to us not that long ago, and now they're part of the Livin family, and we are so grateful for them and all the work that they do.
And they've all got, each of them have got their own unique journey and their own lived experience and their own story, which they add in for the Living Well angle. And I guess it goes to show that, struggling and having mental health challenges or an illness, is very common. And if you're struggling with a diagnosable mental illness right now, you're definitely not alone. There are a lot of other people that are in a situation similar to yourself. But I'm also very mindful that no one knows exactly how anyone else feels. So if I've got anxiety, in case you've got anxiety, I can't sit here and say, I know exactly how you feel. I might get an understanding of how you feel, but I certainly don't know exactly how you feel, because that's the beauty of being a person. We're all very different and we're all very unique.
Which is something we touch on in our Living Well program. And that's also the beauty of, people getting help or self-care. What works for myself doesn't necessarily work for you, and vice versa. So it's all about finding that balance and finding what works for you and what makes you happy.
Yeah, finding the right fit.
Yeah, certainly.
And then obviously the merch creates a conversation, and it's almost like a behavioural change. People become part of the LIVIN initiative, so to speak. You get the nod of approval if you see someone else walking down the street with a LIVIN hat or a snapback or a hoodie on. Can you shed some more light on the vision around the merch case?
Yeah, well, I was with the staff members I just sort of mentioned. I was going around in my head. It's easy to go around in order of where they sit in the office. So next cab off the rank is actually my wife, Amy. She's been from us from, when it was just Sam and I. She came in and alleviated some of that burden or some of that load on us. And so she's kind of across everything we do, but she's mainly in the merch. That's kind of the background she came in from before. She had her own boutique and label and etc. Blah blah blah. But the merch started for us as a conversation starter. It started as a form of advertising for us. I believe, when we first started, we had no money. No one has any money. So we had to use what we could use. And luckily for us, we knew a few famous people, somewhat famous. We won't give them a big head, but Mr. Alex Glenn, NRL player, opened up a lot of doors for us, and a few of the other boys that we played with when we were kids, and the joys of social media. A lot of free advertising, and it kind of just all these walking, talking billboards, and it just took off like wildflower.
And the merch, funny enough, it was the first thing that we launched within LIVIN back in 2013. I remember very clearly you, myself, and Dwayne's mum and Travi sitting up at Mermaid Beach Tavern on the Gold Coast. Never forget it. And we were thinking around names around this possible movement or whatever it was at that stage. And LIVIN was born. Can you spread, because I've got a few questions here, can I spread a question there around LIVIN? How did that start? Where did the name come from?
Well, it's funny. Sam might have kittens when I retell this story. So I was sitting there, we were trying to pick up a name, and I think out of nowhere I said, something like, what about LIVIN or just LIVIN? And everyone kind of looked at me like, you an idiot. And I said, no, I got some good reasons. So Dwayne, if you go back through his Instagram, it's all there. He used to hashtag LIVIN. He used to hashtag, LIVIN and a few other things, LIVIN, same as us. But Sam, if no one knows, Sam's also quite OCD clean freak. Sam lived in America many moons ago when he was an investment banker, weren't you?
No, I worked in finance. Don't talk me up that much, mate. I was just as an associate in finance, just out of uni.
Yeah. Used to wear these oversized brown suits. But anyway, Sammy's got a house here in Burleigh. So this is, Dwayne's alive. It was my birthday one year. And I was living in Sam's house, looking after it, doing my best anyway, while he was living in America. And it's my birthday one night. Dwayne was there. A few of the boys from the footy club were there. And we're having a few drinks, getting a bit rowdy. And Dwayne goes, let's have a ceiling party. What's a ceiling party? Yes, I'll show you. So he runs inside to the lounge room, grabs the grabs the dining chair, and just straight up through the ceiling, the four legs of the chair, pulls it out and does it again. And he's got the big cheeky smile on his face to go, what the hell are you doing? He goes, just LIVIN. And that's kind of how that started. Anyway, my jaw's on the floor. I don't know what to do next. And Dwayne's run off up to my room to grab my laptop so he could Skype Sam to show him what he's just done to the ceiling.
That's insane.
So he's Skyping Sam, and I'm yelling at him. He goes, don't worry, I'll be here to fix it tomorrow. So my birthday's November. It's quite hot. Next day, he's crawling through the ceiling, true to his word, fixing this ceiling. But the ceiling's got all that insulation, and back then it was the itchy insulation. So all I could hear him in this hot ceiling whinging, and I'm yelling out, who's LIVIN now, you little shit? So that's kind of how the name, it's something that he always used to say, and it's what we want people doing. So it's a very fitting name, I believe.
And yeah, it totally is. And I'll never forget that. I remember him Skyping me. I was in the middle of the Midwest, and obviously other ends of the planet, it was freezing. And you guys are just telling me about putting holes in my roof. And I actually knew it was going to get fixed, but I was deep down trying to pretend it was going to be all good, man. But it was killing me. It was killing me. But on that note, I remember obviously at Dwayne's wake, and we put T-shirts together, and we had Dwayne's face on it with one of his messages that he used prominently on his Instagram and from a famous song that he likes by Xavier Rudd. Mate, the merch started was one of our first pillars from LIVIN. I remember, we were running the merch from my kitchen at one stage. Then it was the bedroom at the house in Dabchick Drive in Burleigh Heads. Where did the merch stuff come from around the clothing? I mean, Dwayne's love for clothing and.
Well, I suppose looking back at it, I remember, we did these shirts for everyone to wear to the funeral. They obviously didn't have LIVIN on them, just as you said, Dwayne's face in the song. We were going to give the money to his family, and they just kind of turned around and said, no, donate it to a charity or do something with it. So that's kind of how LIVIN first started. We then had the meeting and came up with the name. And originally we just intended to make clothes and donate to a charity. But when we sort of peeled back the layers, we couldn't find a charity that was doing exactly what we wanted to do or what we knew someone like Dwayne needed. And that was education. To break that stigma and make people feel comfortable in asking for help. There's plenty of great service providers in Australia, in the United States, but there's also plenty of people living in silence through fear of judgment. So we just knew we had to connect the two. And, we started with the clothes and it just kind of grew and we kept adding things on. But the clothes were a great way for us. The first drop was 5 shirts and then 10 shirts, and it just grew each time.
Yeah, I remember running home from my part-time job. I was full-time at that stage, packing orders and sending them off to people. And one thing, like you said, grew to the next. And before we knew it, you and I were full-time in this organisation. We'd recently pitched it to Minter Ellison, turned us to a charity. And before we knew it, we were a nationally recognised organisation.
Yeah, it was, from the very start, we've just been so grateful for we've received so much support from people. I suppose that's probably because of how big this problem is. In a perfect world, we'd sort of have no one asking us to help us, and we'd have to be sort of begging people or trying to explain what it is, what we're doing. But people just get it because it's such a big problem, and they want to help. But yeah, back to that, I remember, storing the clothes at mum and dad's and my house, which was across the road from the neighbours here, from the office here. And it's funny, the house across the road from the office here used to flood. All the clothes were underneath the house. It was on a hill. Used to flood, so whenever there was a lot of rain, all the clothes had to stack them up in boxes. And it's come a long way from hands and knees, packing orders and lining up at the post office to send them out. But I still remember the first time I saw someone wearing a LIVIN shirt where I didn't know the person. It was in James Street here in Burleigh, and so it was great. It was local as well, and I just remember going up and shaking his hand and thanking him. We've got some of our first shirts here on show in the office, and glad we've come a long way from there. Jeez.
Yeah, vintage, mate. Might have to bring them back one day. But as you said, it creates a conversation. It's the cool factor that was missing that I think you and I brought to the mental health sector, so to speak. We wouldn't certainly be in the situation that we're in today if we didn't have the help and the support from people literally all over the world. Australia, obviously, everyone's been so giving, supportive. There are people literally in all corners of Australia that have bent over backwards for LIVIN, have helped push LIVIN in the right direction. And, we thank you guys wholeheartedly for your countless time, commitment. And it goes to show that there are a lot of Dwaynes out there. I mean, when I say Dwaynes out there, I don't obviously mean Dwayne as a person. I mean, we hear, Casey, you and I hear stories of suicide pretty much on a day-to-day basis. This is something that we've been hearing now for 6 years. The problem hasn't necessarily gotten any better. What's your thoughts? What's your visions for the future, and how do you think we could really make a difference here?
Yeah, so that's another question that we always ask. We round table here in the office, because I suppose we're lucky. We're in an office, because I haven't actually mentioned our 2 other staff members yet. We've got our marketing manager Geordie, who she wears a million different hats, and then we've got Luco, our psychologist. Luke, we're very lucky to have him on board. He's formerly of the Australian Defence Force, so all these people, we have like a culture of continuous learning. I don't think any of us sit back on our laurels and just sort of let things happen. We're always wanting to be better. I know next year we're going to embark on a social impact journey, just so we can gauge where we're at and better communicate with the masses the impact that we are having. Take more people on that journey with us, because it's just what we need to do. I suppose the grand vision is just to affect change so people feel comfortable in asking for help, increasing that help-seeking behaviour. Because as we said earlier, there's plenty of great service providers in this country. And even outside of that, there's plenty of great support networks, your friends, your family, your dogs, your cats even. There's plenty of these great support networks around. It's just about educating people on how to engage with them and how to connect and bringing happiness back to people's lives. We're such a culture of busyness and stress now that we just need to remember that how to be happy.
And I'm looking at your shirt here, mate, and then obviously the picture in the background. You've got Dwayne and yourself on a handcrafted piece of artwork behind you in your office, but you've got a shirt that says "You Matter," which is obviously made through the LIVIN, one of LIVIN's collections. Every single person matters, and it's something that we touch on quite regularly within the culture within LIVIN, and it's something that we push across to our community. If you ever feel alone, in the show notes, there will be a list of service, I guess, professional service help providers within the area, both local, national, that will provide within the show notes. So if anyone is experiencing a hard time or wants to find out how to get help or take the next step, we'll make sure that we can help point you in the right direction there.
Certainly.
Case, before we wrap up the show, because obviously we could talk all day. This episode is dedicated to the start of the LIVIN podcast. It Ain't Weak to Speak podcast. We want to send this message viral. We want everybody to know that they aren't alone. We want to educate communities to speak up and to seek help, because the more people that we can educate, the more lives that we could potentially save. And we want to reinforce that with our mantra, "It ain't weak to speak." Now, Case, before we close, before we wrap up, what's the takeaway message that we could leave our listeners with today that are wanting to join the journey and be part of the LIVIN initiative? What do you say to them?
Well, I suppose you touched on it before. You matter. So it doesn't matter who you are, what you're experiencing. You matter to us, and we want you to feel part of the LIVIN community and make it your own. So, you might live in Katherine, Northern Territory. You can create a LIVIN community there. Just because you live in Katherine doesn't mean you can't be part of the LIVIN community. We want people to feel a part of that community, and we want people to be pillars or advocates of change and lead by example and practice self-care daily. Whatever it is that makes you happy, practice it daily. Encourage those around you to practice self-care daily. Go out of your way and do things, small things for people. We've got a Christmas campaign at the moment, which is all about the act of paying it forward and giving. Checking in on the neighbour next to you, or mowing someone's lawn, or paying for someone's coffee. That's something that's so small but will make you feel good and make the person that you give that gift to feel great. So I think it's about doing the little things right. We want people to do the little things right because they add up to the big things. Consistency. Wellness is a journey. So you can't just go take one tablet and think to be cured. It's a continuous journey, and we want people to continually work at their wellness because you matter and you are worth it. Absolutely. And you are loved.
Amen to that, man. Amen to that. And for everyone listening, if you want to find out more, you can head to LIVIN's socials at livin.org, or you can head straight to our website and find out more about who we are, which is www.livin.org. And if you also want to join the Facebook community group after the podcast to continue the conversation, you can find that as well at the livin.org website as well.
Sorry, Sammy, you asked me a question before about the future of LIVIN, and I think we'll probably jump on a few of these throughout next year, and we'll talk more about the future. We'll talk more about the happenings of the right now. But as you said too, this is more about our backstory. This is more about how we got to here. Sam and I have known each other since, I don't know, how old were we? 10, 8?
Very, very young.
Very young. So it's, I'm sorry to anyone if I didn't quite fill in the story for you well enough about what the future will look like. That's a story for another time.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Well, Case, thanks for joining us on the first episode of It Ain't Weak to Speak. We look forward to speaking again. Keep crushing it. Oh, look, that's a beautiful photo. This is on record too. How old were you there, mate? Casey and Dwayne.
Mate, the bowl cut would say I was in grade 1.
It was a tremendous bowl cut too, wasn't it?
Mum still swears it was in fashion, but Dad says it was never in fashion, so I don't know who to believe.
Lovely. Well, mate, great to chat. Keep living, keep working, and send all the love to the staff, mate, and we'll chat soon.
See you, mate. Have a good night.
You too, mate. I'll speak soon.
See you, mate.
Yeah.
Please like, share, and spread the love to as many people as you can. Let people know that you subscribe to the show. Don't forget to leave a review or a comment so that we can grow this community together, because a conversation could save a life. If you want to continue this chat, please join me on the podcast Facebook group at livin.org. I can't wait to share the next episode with you, but in the meantime, stay well, keep living, and remember, it ain't weak to speak. Thank you and have a top day.